welcome back to DPR. Today I'm diving into the pits. I'm grabbing my bow and arrow and I'll be playing Azalea. Azalea is a ranger who uses different sorts of pumps to create big arrows, which she can dominate using her hero ability. In this matchup as Azalea, you're focused on disrupting the arsenal of the Iyslander and pushing a lot of damage, while also trying to maintain a healthy life total. Cards that can help you disrupt the Iyslander are Seek and Destroy and Lace with Inertia. Seek and Destroy being the stronger one, generally leading to discards or having an Iyslander play out their entire hand, and Inertia, putting it underneath the deck, is still disruption of the arsenal. If you can chain the Lace with Inertias, the Seek and Destroys, and sometimes even big damage, forcing them to not get a card in the arsenal, it generally means you are winning. Besides using the big disruption from the Laces and the Seeks, you're also looking to set up at least one big turn. You can do this by using a combination of Snapdragon Scalers, giving an arrow go again, which Azalea lacks the ability to do, and Bullseye Bracers, allowing you to load an arrow without using Death Dealer. If you compare Rain Razors with a bolt and shot, maybe even start off with an arrow into a bolt and shot into another arrow, that's the turn where you do the most damage. You can only do it once, so you have to pick the right timing to do it. Let's jump into the game. I'm playing Azalea against the Iyslander. I'm going second, which is fine because we get to take initiative or get the tempo. She starts off with a red Winter Spite. I discard a red arrow instead of paying 3, especially because I can draw back up to 4, and keeping a blue to fuel our turn feels a lot better in this situation. We do have to block with the blue. I opt to keep the Premeditate because it's a very strong card. In this matchup, it allows us to empty our hand, present damage, and still drop back up a card with the Ponder token to put in the arsenal. We actually get a pretty good starting turn of ourselves, and even if she has Disruption, we can draw a card off the Death Dealer, which, even if it's a red, can fuel the Remorseless, so that's fine. She goes for Brain Freeze, doesn't do anything, we don't have a 0-cost arrow. So we draw, she puts the Premeditate on top, we draw it immediately from the Death Dealer. Of course, we play out the Premeditate. We also play out the Read the Glide Path, just to look for a Dominate arrow. We know there's not going to be any disruption, because she already played it, she didn't give the Frostbite. We see the E-Strike on top. It's a very flexible card, nice to have in the arsenal. So we keep it on top, we fire off the Remorseless. She decides to take the damage, which is very risky, because you need a lot of juice to take any tempo from me, especially if she's on 26, which she will be. We get a Ponder, we have the E-Strike. You need a lot of points of value to come back from taking 11. She does have an Aether Ice Vein. She fuses it with an Ice Bolt. You have some interesting options. You can, with the Aether Ice Vein, the red Aether Ice Vein, you can pay 0, take 5, and then discard, or pay 2 for the discard effect. You can pay 1 and then pay for the discard effect as well. With a blue, that's generally the best option. We don't have a blue. Even if we had a blue, I would probably still discard, because the blue is so important in fueling our turns, especially if she can disrupt our turn. We need the resources, so I won't pay for the damage, take 5, and I will discard a red card, the Melting Point. So generally we start off with the Skullbone Cross Wrappings. It does create a window for her to react, which she does, and in this case it's actually nice for us because it gives us all the information about the disruption we can expect. We still have all the cards in our hand, although Channel can be backbreaking. In this instance it's not, because we have the E-Strike, and we will just pitch the Rain Razors for the E-Strike. bottom, the infecting shot. Lace is one of the most important cards in this matchup, allowing us to still do threaten 7 in a channel and frostbite turn. That's pretty good, especially because normally you need to pay at least 3 resources, a blue for that dealer, plus firing off an arrow. Generally your arrow is 1, you want to add a pump, so it gets really hard to pay everything in a channel like Frigid turn. So threatening 7 with just 1 card, basically with the pitch from Brain Razors, and still having an arsenal is definitely a very good answer. She blocks 2 with the floating resource from the channel and comes back with a Scar for Scar and another Scar for Scar, and finally she'll Coronet Peak. I do understand why she didn't block, because 2 Scar for Scars is pretty nice. Keeping the channel around is very nice as well, because it does lock me out of a turn most of the time. Again, we choose to play with a red. It only costs 1. And now we get an opportunity to keep her off the arsenal with the Lace with Inertia. So we just play out the Lace, costing us a resource. We load an arrow. Bolt and shot because it's 0. And we pay it with the Remorseless. So we use a lot of cards just to fire off the bolt and shot. But it's definitely worth it because we give Iyslander an Inertia. She does need to think about the block for a little while, which is understandable. And in the end, she chooses to block 6. So stemming the damage, but also getting the Inertia. We Arsenal the Ravenous Rebel. It's just a great card to start off the turn. Threatening 4 if you have a red on top, which you can actually look for with the Skullbone. You can also swap in a arrow. You can play the Ravenous and load an arrow with that dealer afterwards, drawing the card you opted. Now we get the Command and Conquer. People generally feel like blocking it out is very important, but especially in this situation there's no real value, because blocking it out will cost us 3 cards or 2 cards in an equipment, which aren't worth. And the Ravenous Rebel isn't a power card that you want to defend. And even looking at this hand with the Premeditate, the Read the Glide Path Codex and the Spire Sniping, there's probably not a card in Arsenal that I would want to defend with blocking. No, not really. So we just take the 6, which is fine. We lose 1 card, we lose 6 life. We're still ahead in life total, and we get to keep the hand, so we still have tempo. And this is the turn that got tricky, because I've watched it back a few times. I tried to commentate it and I thought that I made mistakes, but it's actually a very tricky sequencing that I do. So I start off with the Premeditate. You could technically start off with Read the Glide Path to have more information before you fire off the Premeditate, but that's a little bit nitpicky. We see the Lace, and at this point I'm planning on drawing the Lace with that dealer. So I leave it on top, which ultimately isn't a mistake, but the sequencing could have been better. And now you cannot see the pitch, but I don't have any pitch. And I'm thinking about how can I most optimally use the stuff I still have. So I have the Bullseye Bracers, I have the Tunic Resource, I have the Blue Spire Sniping and the Codex. And now I'm looking into my arsenal to see the targets for the Codex. So there are a few play lines you could do. You could pitch the Codex for the Spire Sniping, which is probably the worst. You can use the Tunic Resource to load in with that dealer, the Spire Sniping. Look for Arrow to Dominate and get a 0 cost arrow with the Codex if you use the Snapdragons, which is probably maybe the best play, to be honest. And I choose for the other play, which is I load in the Spire Sniping with the Bullseye Bracers. If I would have put the Lace on the bottom, we would have seen 2 new cards. Now we only see 1 new card, so we could have bricked, and we could have prevented the brick with better planning on my part. So we put on top the Drill Shot, we loaded it in. And because we have tempo and we're taking a chunk of her life and we have the Codex and she doesn't have an arsenal, I use the Snapdragon to use the Codex. I pick Remorseless because it's a 1 cost arrow. If I would have had an Infecting Shot, I would have picked the Infecting Shot. Remorseless still has the 1 damage if they take an action, but it's not the best. So we use the Tunic resource to fire off the Remorseless. She goes down to 2 cards. She arsenals a Scar for Scar, which is understandable to push back some damage in her turn, because she will not have any cards. And we get the Double Ponder, which, although it doesn't really do that much, in this case it does help a little, because we get to choose which card to arsenal. I chose to arsenal the Blood Rod because the pump spell you put in the arsenal, you flip it up, of course, with its skull bone, and afterwards you have the most options. So you can play out the pump, you can to free up the arsenal, and you can just put it on the bottom for the arrow that you saw. And if I had to choose between playing out a Lace with Inertia or Lace with Blood Rod with an arrow on top, I would always choose the Inertia because it disrupts the arsenal, which helps us keep pushing damage onto the Iyslander. So I arsenal the Lace with Blood Rod, I keep the Lace with Inertia, and we see another great hand with the Infecting Shot, the Blood Rod, the Inertia. In this instance, I feel like there's no need to keep the Deadeye. We have everything we need in our hand, so we can just protect our life total basically for free. So I just block out with the Deadeye because we don't need it. It's the greedy call to keep the Deadeye. And we Skullbone to look on top. We find a Knock, which is the perfect card because it allows us to guarantee a Dominate. Play out the Lace, we load in the Infecting, we play out the Knock to get an Infecting to Dominate. We play out the Lace and we fire off the Infecting Shot. She can only block 1 because it's a dominated attack. We also disrupt her and do the most damage with the Inertia and the Blood Rods. So now she's pushed down to 7. She hits us with a Aether Ice Vein, blue one this time. We only have AB one because we used the Bullseye Bracers. We choose not to prevent any damage because we will not be pitching, we will be discarding. Because again, we have 1 blue fuels the entire turn. And I value the Seek and Destroy more highly than the E-Strike, because you can technically go for E-Strike, bottom the Seek and Destroy, for go again, pitch the blue into Death Dealer, Bolton Shot, and whatever comes off top. But I feel like keeping the disruption up on the arsenal will guarantee us a win, or she will need to block 7. So although it threatens less damage, it's a must block. And if she does not use Tunic, which also has a -1 counter, I see now, means she has to put 3 cards in front of it or D-react. I haven't seen any. We're in turn 5, so maybe she isn't running a whole lot of D-reacts. Most disgusting thing is we draw the Codex. Although basically any arrow would have been good, because we can reload off the Bolton shot. But the Codex also discards a card for the Iyslander. It can not create any disruption because she needs to pick up an attack. She cannot put in a blue ice spell. It's just a very, very tough situation for her. We get the 7 go again. We're looking for targets for the Codex. She blocks 3. Probably to keep up some sort of card combination. We reload. We reload because we can still Skullbone, and if we find a red arrow on top, we win. And if we play out the Codex from hand, we get an infecting shot, and if she has a double block, we they still get a turn. We don't find it, so we just play out the Codex. We get the red infecting shot. She blocks for 6. Gets a scar again. And this is pretty much lethal what we got in our hand. We still have 17 life. There's no need to be greedy, so we still block 3. This is just an easy block. There won't be any disruption, and there's a clear way to win. One of the things that's really nice about Knock is that it's reload, and reloads, at least on Knock, says it doesn't need to be an arrow, it can be any card. So we can play the Knock with the Death Whistle, load in any card. I think we choose the Premeditate, and we can Azalea swap in the arrow we tutored for, which will be dominated. We still get the pump from the lace, and with this sequencing, although she's at 1, which we don't even need the Rain Razors, if she would have been at, let's say, 11 or something, this is still the correct call, because if she would have used any disruption, we could have pitched the yellow. If she had 8 block, which is really hard because it's a dominated arrow, we could still push it over. Worst case scenario, we can arsenal it, so it's just a good idea to keep the Rain Razors in this situation. And that's the game, we win. So we got a quick bonus game. This one is a quick one. We are on the play. We Ravenous Rebel, we load an arrow, get an E-Strike, and we fire off the red in the ledger, which gets blocked out. We draw into 2 E-Strikes, a lace, and a red in the ledger. They attack with a Wounded Bull, pitching a heart. We take the damage, of course, because there's no reason not to take the damage. Skullbone revealing a Read the Glide Path. We start off with the E-Strike, with the go again, just pushing 5 damage. She has a sink, which is fine. We still do 1 damage, it's 1 card less. And we pitch a Bolton shot for the dead dealer, loading in the red in the ledger and getting the Read the Glide Path. This is one of those situations where I still have 1 floating, and if she has an ice card, she can lock us out of our turn. So in this matchup as Azalea, you generally want to keep the last bump in hand, because you can chain the 5 card hands, or you can flip with the Skullbone cross wrappings. But also in this situation where I still have 1 resource, if I'm playing Iyslander, I will look to disrupt at this exact moment, and keeping that 1 card in hand doesn't allow her to go for the disruption. So we fire off the red in the ledger with the Blood Rod, not creating any windows for her to disrupt it. And she has another sink, still gets hit with the Blood Rod. And we draw into a pretty big hand, which is a yellow Ice Vein, pitching away the Channel Lake Frigid. Knowing what I know now, I probably wouldn't pitch away the channel, especially for the Insidious Chill. So I'm just thinking about my turn. If I want to pay 1 to prevent 1 damage and pay 2 for the discard, or just take 0, discard a red, for example. I choose for the latter. discarding the blood rod, so I can go digging. She plays out the Insidious Chill. Again, on the Skullbone, which for Channel Lake it's really nice, but when I have 3 cards in hand, playing out the Insidious right now doesn't do anything. It's much better to wait for the 1 card in hand or the overextension as an Iyslander than for me to just Skullbone, because now I just use the Tunic. I get to find a Infecting Shot. Great card, of course. We just get rid of the Frostbite because we used the Tunic. We play out the Seek and Destroy, which is a very annoying card for Iyslander. We get the Infecting Shot, which does get dominated. It's a 9 dominate with Inertia, pushing her off the arsenal, giving her Blood Rod. Now we get a pretty strong turn again. Here she chooses to go to do a E-Strike, draw a card, not seeing the Seek and Destroy, which is pretty hard on Talishar. She takes it back, which is fine. I mean, Talishar is all about practicing, so she goes to 7, which is the better call. And then the Blood Rod and the Seek and Destroy trigger. Get to choose from the flip. So we basically get to choose which one we want to opt to the bottom. Then the Skullbone resolves. I put the knock on the bottom because I want to flip in the red and the ledger. Because we can actually go for a pretty nasty turn this game. So we have the Skullbone, they don't have an arsenal, which is why you keep her off the arsenal. It allows these kinds of turns where it's gonna hurt. Play out the Rain Razors. So in the previous game you could see that I boarded out the Crow's Nest. In this game I forgot, and why you board it out generally is because of this window right here. If she would have had a disruption card, she could have disrupted me right at this moment. It's something I do as an Iyslander against the Azalea, but she doesn't have an arsenal because we forced it off with the Seek and Destroy. And now you see why, because we can just go to town with the hand we've got. We use the Rain Razors, pushing it to 7, using the Snapdragons. We get to Death Dealer in the Bolt and Shot, which also has go again. We even get a Seek and Destroy. I'm not sure why she didn't block. Playing as or against a Ranger, you generally want to block the Bolt and Shot, because if it doesn't hit, we can't fire another arrow. But if it hits, you generally load an arrow, fire off another arrow. So blocking the Bolt and Shot generally blocks more than the damage you block. It also blocks the next attack. In this situation, I did have the Bullseye Bracers, which means that it doesn't really matter that much. But yeah, this is just devastating. We get to fire off a 3rd arrow, Seek and Destroy it, Rain Razors it, Remorseless. So she surrenders, which I would have done. I would have done the same, probably. Key takeaways in this matchup are: use blues to fuel your turn, account for 1 extra resource needed to fire off an arrow, chain the disruption, try to keep her off the arsenal, and try to keep your arsenal to have the maximum amount of damage, and set up a big damage turn as soon as possible, because if she doesn't have the life to make a swing turn, she cannot come back into the game. Thanks for watching the 2nd episode of DPR. Still, do let me know if you have any feedback, and I'll see you in the next one.